Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 27th, 2009. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, home brewer Matt Troutman joins us to share the results of his strawberry beer experiment. No, it's not a band that you would have seen at Woodstock. It's a test to see what difference it makes to put strawberries in the brew pot or the secondary fermenter. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And you can follow me on Twitter, my username, Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. We also have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video page on Facebook, and if you become a fan of the show there, I'll be sending out notices when shows are posted and such. And I also posted pictures from the experiment that I did. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us and click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you this show, and we appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. And speaking of Brew Your Own, the second Brew Your Own Basic Brewing Radio Collaborative experiment is underway. To take part, by the way, this is the experiment that tests pitching rates in beer. Does the pitching rate affect your homebrew? You know, if you pitch too little, just right, and too much, kind of like the Goldilocks effect there, does it affect the character and performance of your brew? I brewed a barley wine this past Friday with a starting gravity of 1079. I divided the wort into 3 2-gallon batches, and into each of them I pitched 2 grams, 6 grams, and 24 grams of Safal US 05 dry yeast. And that should be enough to see a difference, I would say. Maybe not as much between the 2 and the 6, but definitely between the 2 and the 24, you would think. We will see. It's been fun so far to watch the differences in the performance of those 3 batches of beer. I'm not going to tell you what happened right now. I don't want to spoil the fun, and, I also don't want to influence your results if you're taking part, and I hope that you will join in on the experiment. The details of how to participate are on Chris Colby's blog on buio.com/blogs. And you can also read on there about Chris's false start on his experiment entry. Yes, even good brewers can have bad days, and cheers to Chris for filling us in on his flub up. And you can read more about that on his blog. We learn more from mistakes than successes, I say. At least that's my theory when I screw up. I'm hoping to post the online form to submit your data to the experiment by the end of the week. And even though you probably won't be ready to enter your data yet by the end of this week, you'll be able to find a link to that form and a downloadable PDF instruction sheet and worksheet at basicbrewingradio.com. The deadline for entering your data is September 30th, so you got until the end of next month. I hope you will participate. Let's do a quick look into the mailbag with a couple of mead-related letters. Clifton from Florida writes, I racked my first mead from primary to secondary 2 months ago. Let's just say it was underwhelming at best. Clifton says you could smell the alcohol from across the room. I would have been afraid to soak automobile parts in it, as it may have damaged the parts. I was wondering if the better bottle could handle this extreme alcoholic substance and considered putting it back into a glass carboy. Alcohol was over 10%, but should have been higher. I suspected the Lavalin may have needed a little help. I added a well-aerated starter smack pack, dry mead from Wyeast, with extra nutrients during the re-racking. Well, Clifton says, after 2 months, I re-racked the mead again. It's about 16% ABV and a taste similar to a sweet Riesling. What a difference 2 months makes. I was almost ready to pour it down the toilet, but I was afraid it would kill the septic system. My wait was worth it. I will be bottling on Halloween and may sample a bit on New Year's Day to start off 2010. Thanks, Clifton. Yet another story of a home brewer not giving up on a batch that was having some issues. They can't all be saved, but I'm glad that you found a solution there, and I'm glad that you shared it with us. Sean writes in, and don't know where Sean is. Sean says, I heard mention in one of the podcasts where someone mentioned forced carbonation of a mead in a keg. I found this interesting because when looking at my local homebrew store for my equipment to start out, they mentioned aging mead in a keg as it does not allow light in like a carboy. But can you serve it out of a keg like you would beer? Or being that it's more like wine, is that not advisable? Well, sure. You can serve mead out of a keg. The good thing with kegging mead is that you can control the amount of carbonation. If you decide to carbonate, you can control the carbonation a lot better than you could in the bottle if you were to carbonate, quote-unquote, naturally. And you can carbonate a sweeter mead than you could with bottle conditioning with yeast. If you tried to use yeast to carbonate a sweet mead in the bottle, for example, you'd be taking a chance on getting bottle bombs and having those over-carbonate. The bad thing, if there is a bad thing about mead in a keg, would be that it's so darn easy to serve and to drink. Because that stuff can sneak up on you pretty quick if it's like Clifton's 16% mead. And having a keg of it, it's easy to pour yourself just half a glass. And another half a glass. And then another half a glass. And then the next day, anyway. Not that that's the voice of experience or anything. Okay, let's get into this week's interview. Matt Troutman wrote to me for advice on making a strawberry beer a while back. I pulled some advice out of I gave him some well-informed opinions, and he wrote back recently saying that he conducted an experiment using the strawberries. He made 2 batches of strawberry ale, one pasteurizing the fruit at the end of the boil, and another adding fruit to the secondary fermenter. Now, I found his results very interesting and well written. So I contacted Matt, and he was kind enough to send me a sample of each batch of beer, and we took time for a chat. Now, be sure to stay tuned after the conversation for follow-ups, because I got some further email from Matt, and I got a note from another brewer who had also made a strawberry beer. So stay tuned. Well, Matt Troutman, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. It's great to be here.
Now, you did an experiment for yourself, but you're sharing the results with us, and you have a background in science, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm a grad student in physics. I'm studying astronomy right now, and I'm about a year away from a PhD.
So you know a bit about the scientific process, maybe?
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
Yeah, when I read your write-up in the email, I was impressed with the way it was structured, and you could tell that you sort of knew what you were doing on the science side of things. So I felt pretty comfortable in calling you up and getting the details for an episode. So I appreciate your taking the time to outline all that.
Oh, sure. It's my pleasure.
Give us a little background on your brewing. How long have you been a brewer, and what do you like to brew?
Sure. Well, I've only been brewing for a little bit less than a year now, but I'm already up to about 18 batches or so, purely extract. I've moved to full boils. I guess technically this experiment was my first full boil. I'd done some fruit beers before. My first attempt at a fruit beer was I had a crazy idea to do a raspberry cherry blonde ale. And so I just bought some extract from one of the online shops and a bottle of each. And I didn't read the instructions because, who reads the instructions? And so I just dumped both of the full bottles of extract into my 5-gallon batch, and those came out, and man, they made great rattlers. If you mix the beer with some 7-Up or something, it was pretty good. But on its own, it wasn't so great.
A beer cooler.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was good in the summer.
Well, you live and you learn.
Yeah, I think that was probably my third or fourth batch. So I've learned. I like to think I'd learned a lot since then. Hopefully.
Well, the mark of a good brewer is not that you don't make mistakes, but what you learn after you do make mistakes, I think.
That's right. Read the instructions. That might help.
So you originally emailed me asking for advice on what to do with strawberries in beer, right?
Yeah, I saw your recipe on your website, and I decided to give it a shot. And I saw that you had on there, this was for a peach ginger beer.
Right.
And I saw on there that you had 2 ways of adding the fruit in there to get the fruit flavor. One to add at the end of the boil to pasteurize, and one to add into a secondary. And I think it was just kind of a general advice that either one would work. So I decided to try and experiment to see which one would actually impart more flavors, or which one might taste better, or if there was a difference at all. And so for the experiment, instead of using peaches down in South Carolina, we had a short strawberry season, and the peak of strawberry season came about, and I went over to a local farm station and found some extra strawberries, so I used that instead of the peaches for my experiment.
So how did you prepare the strawberries?
Well, to prepare them, I got advice from you to actually freeze them first. And apparently this breaks the cell walls, so it can release more flavor when you put them into the recipe. Is that correct?
That's what they say.
Okay.
I have no scientific proof of it, but I would I would assume that it makes sense that would happen.
It also, I found that when you take them out, it makes them pretty mushy and easy to cut up or to blend into a nice slurry to put in there.
And also, this helps to kind of control one of the variables in the process, because you used half of the batch of your strawberries for the end of the boil and half for the secondary. If you kept the batch that you used in the secondary in the freezer, then that would help kind of arrest the aging of the fruit, theoretically.
Right. And I did freeze both of them, in fact, and left, I think, the one that ended up into the end of the boil was frozen for, 2 or 3 days, and the other would have been a little bit longer until it went into the secondary.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the recipe.
Okay. Well, as I said, this was the first full boil, because at the time I was working on the small pot. That's the 5-gallon pot, so you couldn't put a full 5 gallons in there. So each batch was about 2.5, came out to be 2.5 gallons. So I'll give the recipes for the 2.5 gallons. The thing that stayed constant between the two batches. It was 2.5 gallons, as I said, and I added 2.5 pounds of light DME, half a pound of amber DME, and just half a pound of steeping grains, some Crystal 15.
Now, is that is that half of the recipe, or is that for the full?
This is all the quantities are for the 2.5 gallons.
Okay.
So if you wanted to make a 5-gallon one, just double all of this.
Okay.
And so I just used the Crystal 15 as steeping grains, and I'm not sure if this is correct, but basically what I did at the time was just left the grains in there as it warmed up to about 170, which takes about half an hour on my stove, and then at that temperature I took them out and went up to a full boil.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Okay. And as far as hops, it's pretty simple. I just use Czech Saaz and German Hallertau, basically what was left in my freezer at the time. just half an ounce of the Saaz at 60 minutes, a quarter of an ounce of the Hallertau for 60 minutes, a quarter of an ounce of the Saaz for 15 minutes, and another quarter of an ounce of Saaz at 5 minutes. And from, I forget which formula I'm using, but I got about 24 IBUs out of it.
Mm-hmm. Which is good because it's a fruit beer. You're not wanting it to be blasted out with bitterness.
Exactly. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to make a middle-of-the-road, sort of like a blonde ale base, but I'm not sure if that's how it came out. Just something to really showcase the fruit if it were in there.
And what yeast did you use?
I used the San Francisco lager. So this was a lager done at ale temperatures, fermented at about 68 degrees.
And was this Y yeast or?
This was White Labs, okay. WLP 810.
Okay. And so you fermented for, well, first of all, let's talk about the procedure for the fruit.
Yeah, so basically, like I said, I did 2.5 gallon batches. And they had the same recipe to try and keep things consistent. And then basically at this point, at the close to the end of the boil, this is when things sort of separated between the two experiments, or the two groups there. One was the group that's pasteurized, and the other group that was secondary, as I might call it. Mm-hmm. So basically I had 2.5 pounds of strawberries that for the boil, or for the pasteurized, at the end of the boil, I took the temperature down a little bit under a boil and added 2.5 pounds of strawberries for about 10 minutes. And this was to pasteurize the fruit in there. And then for the other batch, I just took the temperature down as normal and did the normal procedure to put it into a carboy, and then after some time added strawberries later.
Okay.
The same amount, 2.5 pounds of strawberries.
So what did you see any differences in the vigor of the fermentation between the two batches, the one with the strawberries added at the end of the boil and the one with no strawberries at that point?
I tried to check for that, and I really couldn't see any difference between the two. Obviously, the one with the strawberries added at the end of the boil was cloudier just because of the strawberry material that was in there. And I think this sort of was being churned up in the fermentation before it dropped out when fermentation stopped. Mm-hmm. But really, they both started before about 7 hours. I did use a yeast starter for each one. And this was just a 1 vial and 1 liter starter just to kind of wake things up the day of the boil, mm-hmm. Or the day of the brewing.
Oh, very good. And you fermented both of them in the primary fermenter for an extended period.
An extended period, yeah. I took the advice from your BYO column and the podcast associated with it that said it was perfectly fine or relatively okay to leave leave it on the yeast for an extended period of time.
So you were in the primary for 23 days.
Yeah. This also was just kind of out of I was traveling and couldn't get to things, but 23 days in the primary for both of them. And then, so I kind of had in my head that for the case where the wort was on the strawberries at the end of the boil, it has kind of been mixing with this strawberry material for about 23 days. So I wanted to kind of give the same contact time to the second one, where I would add the strawberries in the secondary. And so what I did is I racked. I went straight to bottles for the batch that was pasteurized. So basically trying to take off from as much of the strawberry material at the bottom of the fermenter. And then for the secondary case, I took the beer and added 2.5 pounds of strawberries and tried to leave it there for about 3 weeks as well, or 23 days approximately, hoping that the same contact time would kind of be a control there.
That's wonderful that you did that. I was wondering, 23 days is an odd number, so I thought I was wondering why it happened, but you did that on purpose, and that's smart. I don't know that I would have thought of that to leave the contact time with the fruit the same. That was smart.
Well, I can't say that I was entirely planning that ahead of time. It was more of the case of I just kind of didn't get to it after a while.
Just take credit, Matt. Just take credit.
Okay.
So did you see any difference in the handling of the beers with the pasteurized fruit and then the fruit in the secondary? Was it messier to deal with one over another, or was there a different stratification of the fruit in the fermenters, or was there, a different performance in those two beers because of the fruit?
I think the only thing that I can really see is that the batch which had been pasteurized had more of the strawberry material drop out. It looked like just a very healthy, thick yeast cake at the bottom. But really, other than that, I couldn't see too much difference between the two. The one that had been secondaried was clearer, and the strawberry material seemed to float more on the top for that one.
So did you see a kick up in fermentation when you added the strawberries into secondary?
There was nothing that I could really notice, no noticeable kick up, but that may have just been because I took off a lot of the yeast when I put it into a secondary fermenter.
Oh, okay, interesting. He scratches his head. Now,
Yeah.
Mental note to talk about that later. And then you bottled and carbonated the secondary beer in the same way that you did the first, right?
That's correct.
You used the Cooper's carbonation drops, right?
That's correct.
One per bottle.
1 drop per bottle.
Now, we actually have these beers. You were kind enough to send me the beers, and I have them here. In fact, they've been out of the fridge for about 45 minutes now, so they're warmed up a bit.
Okay.
Do you have your beers with you, or am I drinking alone at 10:30 in the morning here?
I can grab some, I guess.
Oh, well, that's okay. You don't have to, but so maybe while I'm tasting, you can talk about the results. I mean, you actually invited friends over to do a blind tasting, and you didn't even tell them that they were guinea pigs.
That's right, yeah. I actually took this to a few different events, took the different beers, and basically I told some people, and then other groups I didn't tell that there was a difference between the two. There was still definitely a noticeable difference in the reactions from people, from what people said.
I've sipped the first one, and it's delicious. But
the first one being
the the pasteurized fruit.
Okay.
So tell us what the perceptions of your guests were.
Sure. Yeah, I just kind of took some notes of the general thoughts of everyone. Basically, the stuff what people said about the boil or the pasteurized one is that it's a stronger aroma. It's darker, cloudier. It has more of a earthy taste. I kind of put this to like biting into a strawberry that may have fallen on the ground or something. And then the strawberry taste is really kind of a secondary almost effect. It's in the back of your mouth mostly. And what people said about the secondary is it's a weaker aroma. It's much more amber in color, a little bit clearer. It's a very light taste, but a bright flavor.
Yeah, that's a good descriptor. I was thinking bright as well. But there is a difference in carbonation levels Talk about that.
Yeah, so I noticed that the beers that had the strawberries in the secondary, they had a much more chance of foaming over. And I guess there's some extra fermentation happening in the bottle with the secondaries there, which to me is a little bit surprising. Just naively, I guess I would think that the strawberries that had been in the boil or at the end of the boil may have had a chance to kind of mush up a little bit more since it was blended, and then therefore kind of be stratified throughout the beer. And then when you carry that over to bottling, since it bottled right away, I would think that there would be more strawberry material that would contain sugars for the yeast to feed off of in the bottle.
I just wonder, since the beer was on the primary for 23 days, I wonder if a lot of the yeast dropped out so that when you transferred it to secondary, maybe there wasn't, and this is just me talking off the top of my head, but maybe there wasn't enough yeast in suspension to do the complete job of fermenting the strawberries, so that maybe there was more unfermentable sugars or more unfermented sugars to go into the bottle, so that there was more activity in the bottle.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
That's just me speculating.
Mm-hmm.
Another possibility could be that there may have been some some wild yeasts or some little buggies on the strawberries that were put in the secondary, and maybe they continued to eat the sugars that were unfermentable in the to normal yeasts, mm-hmm. but it was in the secondary for 23 days. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a carbonation difference in the two, and I'm wondering also if that doesn't add to the perception of brightness in the secondary beer as well.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I guess if the one in the boil had been carbonated more, you'd get more of the the bubbles kind of taking the flavor around your tongue, giving it that brighter flavor.
They're both very good beers, both delicious beers. And someone tweeted me today saying that he was interested in hearing about the strawberry beer because Randy Mosher in Radical Brewing, and I can't remember the exact quote, but apparently in Radical Brewing, Randy Mosher said that strawberries don't make a good beer. So I'm going to have to differ with Randy on that one. These are both really good beers. The interesting thing is that I'm getting a lot more spice kind of in the pasteurized beer. There's almost I would swear that you added something like nutmeg or maybe cinnamon or something in the first beer.
Huh. Well, the stove is close to the spice rack, but I don't know if any got in there.
A cat wasn't wandering around knocking things off shelves.
Well, he always does that, but I did read. I was kind of looking into other fruits that might be available or might be better, and everyone that I saw online had suggested strawberries as a bad taste because apparently it just disappears in most beers. But I would have to differ with those people based on what I found here. I mean, I think the strawberry flavor comes through pretty well.
Yeah. Now I don't know that I would have been able to pinpoint that it's strawberries, especially in the first one, since I am getting a lot of that spice. This would make an excellent holiday beer. The second one may be. I'm actually getting more aroma off of the second one than I do the first one, or at least more strawberry aroma.
Right.
So maybe I'm differing with your group of testers on that one.
And you did say that these have been out a little bit more, so warmed up. So probably you're getting a better judge of aroma than straight off the bottle or straight out of the refrigerator.
Now, I'm getting on the secondary one. I don't know. There's a little. It maybe a tiny bit plasticky. Like there's some, or at least back in the 70s, there was these little fruit drinks that came in little plastic bottles with a foil top.
Oh, yeah. I actually think I've had a few.
And, there's that, I don't know if it's a flavor or a smell from the plastic, but you know what I'm talking about?
I think I do, yeah. Do you think that may have come from some of the bugs or critters that may be on the strawberries going into the secondary?
I don't know. It's a good question. But there is definitely a difference between the two. And I'm not necessarily thinking strawberries when I smell it.
Okay.
But it's tasty. It's just a kind of, like I say, half a note of that smell in there, but not enough to slow me down. I'm just being way picky here, and I think maybe if the beer was colder, I wouldn't even be noticing that at all.
Right.
So what are your conclusions? I mean, what do you think? What would you recommend to someone if they were using strawberries in a beer?
Yeah, I think most people preferred using the secondary as the beer that they choose. So I would, but I kind of like the spicy note that you get from the pasteurization or the boil. So maybe what I would do is take maybe a third of your strawberries that you're going to use and put them into the boil, and then take 2/3 of that and put them into the secondary. And kind of use both, because there are definitely different flavors and aromas that you get out of the different processes, and kind of mixing those two might be a good way to go on a fruit beer.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a little more extra work, but you might wind up with some complexities that you wouldn't have before. In tasting the pasteurized beer, it is darker. Not only in color, it's a couple of shades darker in color, but it is the flavor is sort of darker and spicier. That's really interesting. I'm so glad you sent the samples, because just hearing about other people's perceptions is obviously not as fun. But are you going to try this technique with other fruits as well?
Well, I think I'm starting to move away from fruits a little bit. I sent you another beer, which was what we call the Lyman Alpha, and it has a meaning in chemistry and physics as a transition, so it's kind of a play on words there. But I used limes in that beer, and used some lime marmalade, actually, in there, as well as zest from limes. And that I sent that into a competition because I felt that was a little bit of a stronger beer, and it scored pretty well. And so I think that kind of might be the end of the first chapter for me on fruit beers. I think I'm going to move into focusing more on styles.
Well, now you're being a bit modest. You sent a note along with the beers, and I think you're being a bit modest on the beer scoring fairly well. It got like a 40, didn't it, out of 50?
Yeah, at one of the competitions I did, and somehow I still got third place in that group, in the group of fruit beers. So there must have been, there were some excellent beers there.
Wow.
Definitely.
Well, I'm going to take that over to Steve's house. We're going to shoot some B-roll today on a chili beer experiment for the video podcast. So we will enjoy that, and I appreciate your sending that as well. So final thoughts. What can you What can you wrap us up with, Matt?
Well, I would definitely recommend doing fruit beers, and if you want to try the similar experiment, it's really not that much work. You just find some fresh fruit. I think fresh is definitely the way to go, even though it does kind of get hidden in the beer a little bit. Get some fresh fruit and try it out for yourself. It's not that much work, and you get a great end product, especially for the end of summer here. A great fruit beer is a good thing.
Amen, brother. Well, Matt, I really appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate your time and talking to us, and I appreciate the beers.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I have to say, if the beers came out to any kind of quality, it's I have people like you to thank for all the information you provide. So I appreciate it.
Aw, shucks.
You can cut that part out if you want.
Oh, no, I'm keeping it. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It was very kind of Matt to say that. I appreciate that. After we finished our conversation, I got a follow-up email from Matt, as I said earlier. Matt says, I knew I couldn't wait after hearing your description of potential bugs in the beer, so I just tried the secondaried beer. Wow, it's a totally different beer now. There is definitely a plastic taste in there that was not there before. It almost reminds me of the plastic tubing. Is this something caused by the critters that may have come over from the strawberries? I'm afraid this will not be something that goes away over time, so I might not let it sit for too long before trying to finish off this batch. I might have to recommend that if you brew this type of beer using fruit in the secondary, try to finish it quickly. It really was very nice and refreshing about a month ago. So, maybe there's something from the strawberries still working in there, especially if something increases, some off-flavor increases. It may be an indication that there's some kind of buggy working in there. Then I got this letter from Joe in Delaware, Ohio. Joe says, my last batch was a strawberry ale. That turned out well if you like sour, over-carbonated beers. I'm guessing that I got a Brett infection, meaning Brettanomyces, the up until now called wild yeast. Joe says, should I replace my buckets and tubing, or will I be able to sanitize them so the Brett does not affect my next batch? I told Joe that it may have been the fruit and not his gear that caused the infection, and not to toss everything out, just to sanitize very well and, try another batch. And if that one's, not spoiled, not sour, then he's probably okay. And I told Joe about Matt's experiences with adding beer in the secondary, and he responded, the strawberries were actually put in with the cooled wort in the primary fermenter. The recipe called for 1 Camden tablet in the strawberry must 24 hours before brew day and adding the cooled wort. Maybe an additional tablet or 2 was needed. When you open the bottles, there's about a 1-second delay, and then they gush. Is that indicative of a Brett infection or something else? That sounds exactly what I saw with Matt's second beer. It looked okay for a second, and then, woo, out it came. It wasn't violent, but, it did come out of the bottle there. I don't know if it was necessarily a Brettanomyces infection. There are plenty of other little, buggies out there in the air and apparently on strawberries. So who knows what it was? So there's another bit of information to consider there. Joe added a Camden tablet into his strawberries 24 hours before brewing and still apparently got some critters. Maybe. So what do you think? Do you have similar experiences with strawberries or fruit beers in general? What's your favorite way of dealing with it? Drop me a line and let me know. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can check out our homebrewing DVDs, Introduction to Extract Homebrewing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. And there's a couple of logbooks left. They're still good. They don't go stale. We've got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And you can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. And I'll pack it up myself and send it to you. We got shirts of different colors on the shop as well. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are the Whole Beast Nose to Tail Eating and Norelco Head Holder. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association through our associate link on basicbrewing.com. And along with getting a free issue of Brew Your Own magazine. And if you subscribe, you'll be supporting us as well. That's all until next week, everybody. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio, and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.